Okay, lads. So 2006 question 5. Really, it's the B and the C part. That needs to be. Well, you asked me about the C, but in order to do the C, I need to have done the B. So the B part is fairly straightforward. It's draw a graph. So in order to draw the graph, you're going to set up your values. You have your X values, you have your Y values. You'll fill them in. I haven't filled them all in, but of course you'll do that. Take note, please, of the use of the brackets. Okay, not so much an issue, I think, for this question because there's no negative numbers. But when you're drawing graphs and there are negative numbers, sometimes if you don't put in the brackets into the calculator won't understand what it is you wanted to do, or will misunderstand what you want. You can see on the right hand side of the screen then, so I've drawn that graph, and this axis here, what we would normally call the y-axis, that's the height. Okay, and of course what we would call the x-axis, they're still calling it the x-axis, but in actual fact it represents time. And that's really important to get your head around, okay, to know what axis represents what. So if we're on to part C, we've done the part B there. If we're on to part C, it says use your graph from B, which we have, to estimate the maximum height reached by the ball. Not a difficult question to do, but I just want to draw your attention to this part of the graph here. The 2 points that I've plotted, I've got them in red here, I'll just mark them in green again, here and here. They're 2 points that were given to me and I plotted them. But the ball, for example, wouldn't stream on up here and then stop at this point and just go straight across and then fall back down. It's going to go up in a nice curve and back down in a nice curve. So what we're expected to do when we're drawing this out is we're expected to show that in the curve. So the maximum height isn't 60. In actual fact, we go to the top of the curve. Sorry, you can't see that. 1 second. Try again. You go to the top of the curve. There we go. The curve that you have drawn in. Now that top or that curved part, that's why your graph has to be, you take your time with it, has to be as accurate as it can be. That curved part needs to fit in with the rest of the curve as well. Okay? And that's where you get your estimate from. So you go across, we're asked for height, which means we're going to go across to the y-axis. Our height written, it's an estimate, it's here. You're given a little bit of leeway in the exams, but not too much. So we're probably looking at, there's about 65, there's 60, 62 perhaps, maybe 62.5. I don't think it'll be quite 60. Would it be 60? Yeah, maybe 62.5. So I think the answer for part 1 there, 62.5 meters high. Okay. Part 2 of the question. The height of the ball after 5.5 seconds. Well, 5.5 seconds, that's a time. So I'm going to scan along the x-axis. I'm going to find 5, then 5.5. I'll go straight up and straight across. And again, as accurate as you can. Sometimes I find when people draw this in, now you can't see it on the screen, but I've got a grid on my page here, and you'll have a grid on your page. But sometimes I find when people are doing this, their lines actually aren't straight. They don't run parallel to the x and the y axis, so you have to be really, really careful. Take your time. Didn't show in. Still only half showing for me. There we go. So, after 5.5 seconds, this is part 2, the height of the ball, it was actually on its way back down, was about, we've got 30, maybe 38 and a half, we'll say 38 meters. Of course it was 38 meters at another time, and we're going to deal with a question like that in a second. So, last part of the question then, part 3. On 2 occasions the ball is 20 meters above the ground, so we're back to our height. We have to find those 2 occasions. So it's height that we're given, so it's going to the y-axis we'll go to. So I'll find 20. I'll draw my line straight across. And the points that I'm interested in are the points where it cuts the curve. So you can see them cross the red there. At here, just at that point there. And you can even see there I've come down not as straight really as what I'd like. If I were doing that in an exam, I would redo that. Okay, that needs to come down a little bit straighter. I think I've turned it just a touch. Again, there's another time when that happens. Try and do it right this time. Straight down there. So our 2 times are here and there. So part 3, about half a second, so 0.5 seconds, and 6.2, 6.25. And that's that part of the question dealt with. Okay. But again, just I'm drawing your attention to this bit up here where we had the arrow a moment ago. Okay, at the beginning of the question. So you're expected to approximate that turn, that curve. Okay. All right. I'm going to move on. There was one more part of a question you asked me to do. It was question 2C. Quite a wordy question. And one of those questions, like not typical project maths. There's no doubt about that. But very wordy, and a lot of words is typical project maths. And I've said to you before, over and over and over, you do not even begin the question until you've got a really, really good sense of what the question is about. Okay. You need to read that question several times, and I don't mean 2 or 3, and I don't mean a scan. I mean read it, really read it, and every piece of information that's in there is in there for a reason. And every time you read a piece of information, you say to yourself, well, what is that? How does that tie in with the story? What does that change for me? Okay. So it says there, a merchant buys tea for €2.29 per kilo and sells it at a profit of 60%. Which is the cost price to a customer in England. The exchange rate is £1 sterling to 145 or 146 euros. You're asked to calculate the selling price of tea in sterling, correct 2 decimal places. Now I'm going to go into this question, but I want you to understand I have read this question a few times before doing this video. Okay, so I haven't read this just once and now here I am, off I go. I've read it several times. So if I'm reading it several times, you need to read it a lot. So let's be clear about what we're asked to do. We are asked basically to convert something into sterling, euros into sterling. We need to be clear, what is the euro quantity that we're trying to convert? It's not 329, because 329 you have to add on 60% to that first, and then you're asked to convert that into sterling. So nice simple way to do that, 329 on your calculator plus 60%. Remember to put in plus 60%, it's plus 60, second function 1. Don't hit the equals button. When you do that, the euro value is €5.264. I'm not going to round up or down at this point. Now what I have to do is I have to convert that euro value into sterling. Well, a lot of people will have different ways of doing this. I'm going to stick to the way that I've shown you, the way that will always work. If you can see the quick way to do it, I've no problem with it. But I'm just going to stick to the method that I've shown you. So £1 sterling, we're told, is €1.46. In order to get 5.264 euros, I need to get €1 on its own first of all. So I divide both sides by 1.46. That'll leave me with 1 over 1.46. I'm not going to bother with that, changing that in the calculator just yet. And that'll give me €1. If I have €1 and I want 5.264 euros, I multiply by 5.264. What I do to one side, I must do to the other. You can see there that my euro value to give me my sterling, effectively it's just 5.264 divided by 1.46. Now some of you will have seen that straight away, some of you will not. If you don't, this is it's a simple way. You've been doing it for a few years now. What are we going to end up with? £3.61 is the equivalent of 5.246, or 64. And there's the first part of the question done. and most people will manage that. The second part of the question, now the second part of the question isn't actually that difficult, but you really do need to read it several times to get your head around it. So I'm going to read it first of all. So the exchange rate is £1 sterling to £1.50. It changes. The selling price in sterling remains the same. Okay, so that means that 361 that I've just worked out from part 1, that's not changing. Okay, that's the selling price in England or in the UK. That's it. It's not changing. Calculate the merchant's percentage profit in this case. Corrected the nearest whole number. Okay, no problem. Let's be clear. Percentage profit. I'm asked to calculate percentage profit, so that means that at the end of this question, I'm going to use, our our catch-all statement, change over original multiplied by 100. So I'm going to be using that. Okay, so I'm going to have to I just need to try and figure out what's going to go in where. So again, the exchange rate has changed, 150. It was 149, now it's 150. Calculate the merchant's percentage profit in this case. Alright then. Well, we're told that this 361 down here, it doesn't change. So what we need to do is we need to convert 361 back into euros, but instead of using the exchange rate that we've just used in part 1, we're going to use the new exchange rate. So the new exchange rate is that £1 is equal to 1.5 euros. So if I want to make £1 into 361, well, I multiply by 3.61. What I do to one side, I must do to the other, which tells me 361 euros, which is the selling price that's not changing, is now equal to 5 euros, 5.415 euros. Okay. Now the merchant buys the tea at 3.29 per kilo. So if we want to know what the change is, that remember that change will feed into the percentage profit. He adds on his percentage profit to get, and that's what changes the original figure. So what I need to do is I need to take off 3.29, and that will give me my change, and that change is 2.125. So now that I know what the change is, I can say change over original times 100. Well, the change we've just figured out is 2.125 divided by the original. Well, he's still paying 3.29. Multiply it by 100. You're going to get, when it's rounded up, you're going to get 65%. So the exchange rate is good for him. He's making more profit. Okay? Exchange rate is good. That's it. That covers everything you asked me on that paper.